home, went down each year, which corresponds to the prior page that I showed you on the amount of property taxes that was generated, to the point that in 2014, the person who was paying $120 back in 2009 on 3 mills was now paying $84.12. Basically, again, it's driven by the value of real estate. Value of real estate went down, property tax values went down. So correspondingly, individual property owners' property taxes went down, and in this case, it dropped from what Henry Ford was receiving at $120 on 3 mills in 2009 to $84 on its same 3 mills in 2014. 15, 16, and 17, you can see is when the additional mill came into effect. What did that do? It raised it from $84.12 to, you can see, $115.27, $116, a slight little drop to $115.32, and then in 2018, $119.24. So what I'm showing here, trying to bear out, is that the property tax owner in 2009 was paying $120 in property taxes for the community college, for Henry Ford College. On 3 mills, we're now in 2018, which just passed, they're paying it on 4 mills, but we're paying $119.24. Almost exactly the same. So you can see that a mill lost value because of property tax values by 1/3 in this case, or the 20, or 1/4 rather in this case, of $30. So that's, I wanted to bear that out to you in the best way we can. I got to give a lot of credit to Brian for looking at Bain for looking at this information, Kevin for doing this as well, and between the three of us really beating on this to get this communicate this and show that the 3 mills is really equal to 4 mills today is really equal to 3 mills from what it was back in 2009. What does this have? What kind of an effect does this have on our sustainable budget? Well, we do a projection to 2022 with the one mill. In 2019, we have a budget on that's been presented that has a $811,000 surplus for 2019. 2021 and 22, projection-wise, of a surplus of $1,300,000, $600,000 in 2021, and $1,300,000 and $1,247,000 in 2022. By losing that 1 mill, what that effectively does is takes us from a surplus of 1.3 in 2020 to a deficit of $2.8 million in 20, $3.6 million in 2021, and a little over $3 million in 2022. And as you can see, the difference, that 1 mill is approximately, like I said earlier, $4.2 million. So with that question, it says maintaining the 1 mill, just to maintain sustainability, you'll see a chart. I try to make this as big as I could, so let me try to walk through this, and if there are questions, let's answer the questions as we go through it. It shows what was done, the initiatives that were done in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. In 2015, to the far left, you can see academic staffing, developmental staffing totaled $615,000. That's not one time. That was put in, those were added on a permanent basis in 2015. You will see there are a number of other things there: academics, campus safety, facilities, finance, institutional research, a small amount, beefing up the marketing budget by $400,000 plus on a permanent basis, and student affairs. Total permanent additions, $1,755,000. If you keep going to the right, we added another $720,000 in 2015, which means the permanent additions are now at $2,476,000. You go to the next year, an additional $268,000 to $2,744,000, and then finally in 2018, $703,000, or almost $3.5 million. $3.5 million out of the 4.2. You see some other columns in there that are one-time things. Well, since it generated around $4.2 million each year, there were things we did permanently and a number of things we did on a one-time basis in academics, in facilities, roofs, equipment, upgrades to the grid, IT upgrades to our backup structures on a one-time basis with software. So you can see there's also one-time things that were done that weren't permanently. You do them 1 year and you have the funds available for the next year. Within the document that I sent to you that Kathy sent out last week, there's a lot more detail there. That same page is in this document here, but there's a supporting page which you're going to need glasses to see, or magnifying glass to look at, because it goes through and identifies the individual permanent changes, the one time, and it ties it to the strategic plan as to which item here within the strategic plan, those items that were added permanently on a one-time basis can be tied. So again, certainly we should have brought additional copies of this with us tonight, because I didn't think of the fact that we would need them tonight. But anyway, this first page that I did here shows the total at $3.5 million. Now, Kevin, keep in mind, go back to the far upper left-hand corner of this where it shows permanent total staffing of $615,000, and then I'll walk you through that on the next page. The next page shows, okay, what makes up that $615,000? Well, there were four things: faculty additions, other non-teaching additions, other support staff, and development staff, $615,000. Oh, okay. Well, what makes up the faculty additions of $429,306? And you can see the list of where we went through: ELI, automotive, learning lab, culinary, engineering, Arabic languages, and another language, totaling up to the $429,000. So what this does is, the 3 pages that are in the handout, it builds on each other. You'll see a number, like I'm giving here for the example, the $615,000. What makes up that $615,000, and then what makes up the $429,000 that we show for faculty and for instruction. So you can go through that, pinpoint each one of them, and then each one of those are tied to the strategic plan. So I reiterate that in that handout. We can get that information if you want it. Again, it's not a big problem at all. But again, it takes that $3.5 million we talked about that we're added on a permanent basis, identifies specific by what item it is, just like I showed as the example with the instructional area here, of what is made up with those things and how that is tied to the strategic plan, which we've been working toward for the past 4 years. So I emphasize the recommendation. We're doing the presentation here today. I know there'll be questions coming forth later on, but the administrative recommendation is to go for the renewal. It's in the board report for an additional 5 years at $1 million, with the support that we've shown here. There's been a number of issues or discussions about what happened 5 years ago. I can't answer those questions directly. All the literature that I have in my possession and what I passed out as part of an addition to your packet tonight from the 2013 millage was that the verbiage is the additional mill was needed to make up for the loss of over $4 million in property tax revenue over the recessionary period. We're at that point right now where we're just about even with where we were in 2009 and the monies that were lost during that period of time, but we aren't quite there yet. And with the state appropriations still not coming to fruition like folks have hoped, and with the other part of it, trying to keep tuition again below $100 where we're at right now, we're recommending that we go forward and ask for a November ballot issue to add or to renew the additional mill. We have the mill for this year, for 2019, which takes us through June 30th, but at that point, that's when it gets dicey.
Any questions? Trustee Barry?
Mr. Sapkowski, you mentioned 5 years ago. Let's go back 5 years ago. We had some dark days at this
We sure
college
did.
5 years ago. We were dealing with bad debt to the tune of almost a little over $18 million. I know the administration, with support of the board, reached out to the faculty, to the employees, and got as much help as they can from the faculty. Then we went out to the community. The discussion was that we needed probably about $10 million to get out of this hole. One mill at that point was, according to the reports, was a little over $3 million,
Yeah.
so that made sense. And I know there's only Trustee Lane and myself still on the board that was sitting at the table back then. But we went out to the community and sold it that this is going to be temporary. 3 years, possibly up to 5 years. I remember the paper quoting one of the former board members saying is that, once we get to a point where we're financially stable, we can most likely give the money back. The reason we went out and combined the 2.5, the half mill, and the 1 mill was because, she was brilliant the way she did this, Trustee Shellis. Yeah, at first, we were gonna go out for the 3 mills and the 1 mill at the same time. Her argument was, people would say, 3 mills, 1 mill, yes on the 1 mill, no on the 3 mills. So we combined them. But the meeting of the minds of the board back then was that there's gonna come a point where we need to give this back. Not only that we didn't give this back, I've been on the board for over almost 2 years now, and the financials, pretty good. We're in good shape, from what I'm seeing. And I know when we went out to sell that 1 mill to the community, we went out and, not we, somebody went out there and said, if we don't get this 1 mill, this college is going to close. So, we had very supportive constituents, taxpayers, they gave it to us. And the fear of all 7 board members back then was we're going to come back and say, we're going to find a way to sell it to our taxpayers that this is not a tax hike. This is not a tax increase. And here we are. It's going to be very difficult. There isn't an appetite right now on the community for taxes. I know the city talked about going out for some mills in August, possibly in November, and that was shut down pretty quickly. I think we're going to have a hard time right now going out to the community and asking for a renewal of this 1 mill. I sell real estate in the area, and we're getting taxed in Dearborn at 62 mills. People in Dearborn understand that they're getting their tax, they're getting their money's worth in Dearborn. Try selling a house to somebody coming here and comparing Dearborn to Livonia to Canton to Sterling Heights, we're losing out, those potential Dearborn residents. So I think we should reconsider this. I know that's just your recommendation at this point, and it's up to the board. The board makes the final decision, but my position would be that we should reconsider this or figure out a different way to do this.
Trustee Thorpe?
When we look at the numbers, one of the other reports shows us our cash balance at the end of each year over the last 5-6 years, and at the end of 13, we had a cash balance of $5 million, a little bit north of $5 million. Now we're approaching $25 million, so that 1 mill increase has helped us in that respect. And we can't use an excuse of that we need to build up our cash anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look through the presentation that you just gave, I'm totaling that there was about $1.8 million in additional personnel cost over those 5 years. Have we had any change in our student number in those 5 years? If we're adding personnel, are we adding students?
Where we're at, and again, that was a question that was asked of me today. and that is the only way I can answer that is through some of the data that we do with our comparables. The enrollment has been since the low point, or since the high point when it was the bad debt was out of control, the deregistration wasn't taking place. Since that time, we've been fairly flat, one year we would be up. Last year we were down about 1.5% when you look at 2018's numbers. So relatively enrollment has been stable since that bad year back in 2014, since 2014. With that as well, we continue to monitor our position within the state of Michigan. And one of the items I wanted to bring forth tonight that's in this document is that when you look at this college and look at its budget, we spend 55.7% of our budget in the instructional area. State average is 45%. So quite frankly, we're doing a pretty darn good job when it comes to getting the money into the classroom, into the areas, into the instructional area for students. Where we lack in is instructional support. We're at 8.5%. The state average is at 13.6%. Student support services, again, an area, if you go through and look at the priorities we have here, we have navigators in there. We have developmental coordinators, we have ELI, we have that area of support for student services. We're at 14.1% and the state average is 13.7%. So quite frankly, and if you ask my opinion as a non-academic, everybody's an academic when you work in a college, but as a finance person, we're putting the money where we should be putting it, in the instruction and in the student services area. Now when you look at administration is at 11%, state average is 13.9%, and there's not one institution on this sheet that has a lower percentage of administration than Henry Ford College does. And this is numbers from the latest year of fiscal year 2017. We haven't even finished 2018 at this point. But the trend there is that we have not put the money in the administration area. We have put the money in the areas that affect the students the most. And that's where we've done it with the one-time money as well, in terms of fixing infrastructure, IT in particular, marketing to get more and more students in the door, as well as with work within our physical plant, which was woefully, or still needs considerable work, but has gone a long way when you look at the budgets we've established for IT and furnishing replacement on an annual basis, which never took place until 4 years ago. So to answer your question, from a standpoint of where we're putting our dollars, yes, there are some positions that have been added in here, but the positions have been put more so into the areas that affect students directly and supporting their activities and making them more successful. Now, percentages are good, but you have to remember too, our budget is only $9,400 per student. So we're putting in less money per student in each one of those areas than our counterparts are, because we don't have the revenue generation, particularly in the property tax area, that they do. So again, putting higher percentages of a smaller budget into those areas is of advantage to our students.
Trustee Petruscoff?
Okay, when you go to sell these kinds of things to the community, and while I wasn't on the board when this came around, I was president of the Federation of Neighborhood Associations, so I did a lot of presentations to the neighborhood associations to try to support this at that time. The question they always ask is, what are you going to do with the money? What's your plans? We're seeing that the last 5 years, a lot of permanent build-ins occurred, mainly with instructional arena for the benefit of the students. But that's what people are going to ask. If we keep on doing a 5-year $1 mil, people are going to ask, when does it end? Why do we keep seeing this every 5 years? And what is it going to take to not have this come up again? Or what are you doing with the money that we need to keep seeing this every 5 years? So what is the answer that we're going to be able to give them?
I think the answer to that would be we took that 1 mil that we received. It generates $4.2 million. That took a significant hole in our budget 5 years ago. We've filled that hole with that $4.2 million. We've been able to put it into areas of student services, student development, student instruction. As the memorandum from the Board of Education back in October of 2013 stated, that the proposal is asking HFCs 3 mills and then for 10 years and 1 additional mill as an increase to support special student success initiatives, including students wishing to further their education in a 4-year environment and remain in Dearborn while they're doing that. Student success centers, upgrades and purchases of state-of-the-art technology and laboratory equipment, and enhanced distance learning courses and degree programs at the college. The restoration mills will be used to restore reduced funding as a result of declining state of Michigan appropriations and decreased local property taxes. And I think the message that I try to convey here was that this is still dealing with the decreased local property tax issues over the last 10 years, 2009 to now. There's been no increase in that. It's held its own. We've been able to fill a number of gaps. And until that revenue stream increases, which is limited by the Headley Amendment to either 1.5% or 5%, whichever is the least, I remember the discussions with the Plant Moran folks that it'd probably take us by 2034 to get back to the property tax levels with 3 mills that we enjoyed back in 2009. So it's maintaining where we're at. We do have a good bottom line. We did add to it because we did not fill positions at the beginning of the year, so we had some one-time monies that are going to flow to the bottom line this year. And I just think that's what you have to do to be ready for, I'll just say it, the next downturn in the next 3 to 4 years after our legislature has fun cutting the state income tax, and then in 3 to 4 years finding out they don't have enough money to run everything, and colleges and universities will suffer again. So that's my soapbox for that issue. But anyway, it's to maintain where we're at, and quite frankly, maybe in 5 years, recovery to the point of property taxes and a significant oil find in the state of Michigan or something in Michigan that generates significant state revenues that would get state appropriations back to where they were 10, 15, and 20 years ago when it was over 50% of everybody's budget will happen. But I'm not holding my breath for that.
Trustee Barry?
What do you tell that taxpayer that says, you said this is a one-time thing?
I can honestly say that I never would have said that because, I'm looking for literature, that we've had that was issued back in 2003 of what would be done with that. Everything I've seen and identified and looked at talks about the second proposal asks us to approve a 1 meal increase for 4 years to support student success initiatives, not to be a one-time tax, or one-time use, but to identify the 6 bullets that I'll have in that document to get us back to where we were at. I don't have with me, yes, I do have with me, but I also have not only the Board of Education's report saying that it's a replacement for decreased local taxes. There's also the board report back that was done a few months before I started that stated it's a replacement of the $4.5 million of lost local property tax that has transpired since the recession.
Yeah.
And I would say to that person also, your individual property tax, living in that home that you're in, has not increased with 4 mills compared to 3 mills because the loss in the taxable value of the home, which is starting to come back up, is there, basically was a tax cut.
Trustee Petroskopf.
Well, and I went back and read all the newspaper articles from then, and none of them made mention that it was a temporary. So I'm just saying, whatever board members were saying, that's not how it
That's
was
who made the final
reported.
decision.
That's not, but I understand, but I'm saying that's not how it was reported in the press releases at all. Because I did look to see if that was stated anywhere.
It's up to you.
Ms. Chadwick.
Just a little history on this, because I was the person who was responsible for the last 2 villages. And I recall, at the time, we knew we were having some financial struggles, and that was certainly because of the bad debt. But it was also because of flat or declining property taxes and appropriations. So our literature actually said renew, so that was the 2.5 and a half, combined it to 3, and then a restore, and that was the 1 mill. So it was renew and restore. And the reason we didn't combine them into a 4 mill millage is we were afraid we could lose everything. So we said, we'll split them, so we know that we can have the renewal of the 3. The restore, if that went down, we wouldn't have lost the rest of it. So I can tell you, I was absolutely shocked at the support of this community. It's fabulous. And, I went to all of the, the association meetings. I think I saw Gary there quite a few times. And the support for this college is just absolutely phenomenal. We just had completed, and I think part of this is in some of your documents, but we did a socioeconomic impact study. So it's the value that our taxpayers get for investing in this college. And there's an $8.10 return for every dollar that's invested by our community. So, again, they have been extremely supportive. The literature that we have, and I still have, working with Mr. McDonald, it was renew and restore.
And you make a very, very good point that this is a very supportive community, but the ambassadors of this college went out to the community and said, yeah, this is real. We need to do this. But, this is, I can mention names because this is public records. It's in the paper. Trustee Jim Schoolmaster said that this increase is only 3 to 5 years. That's all we might need is for 3 to 5 years. Who else? Trustee Pamela Adams said, if we get to the point where we need 2 and 3 years, we can give the money back. This is how we went out and sold it. We need this is real, without this college is in trouble. Then, if Dr. Jensen comes along, and John comes along, Dr. Jensen got all the credit for it, well, we know who did the work, but, that was supposed to be. Okay, well, then we went out there and started selling it. Thank you very much for your help, thank you for the faculty, thank you for the community, we're in good shape, and we've been building. Since then, we've been building, like Trustee Thorpe said, we almost tripled, available cash on hand. The rainy day fund is almost where we want it to be. So I don't know how I can go back to the same people I went to, especially the business district, the realtors, 450 of them. How do you go to them and say, those people, they have a lot of impact on this community, 450 people that touch thousands and thousands of lives every day. Well, I went out there, and I remember it wasn't Dr. Jensen, it was somebody else from the college went with me to their meeting and said, yeah, this is real. How do you go back and say, yeah, but now we still need it? It's not a tax increase. We're going to show you the numbers. Look.
I think another...
Stuff, I know.
Another important point, too, is when you look at, the contributions to the strategic plan, if you look at the plan, there's kind of a foundational area, which is just keeping infrastructure in place, keeping the train running, versus all of those things on the strategic plan that lead to real solid improvements. the majority of those things fall under the foundational. So it's not like we're, I think, overstaffing. Certainly, we're adding faculty, but we have kind of an area with the Higher Learning Commission where they start to say, you have too many adjuncts in your college. You have to balance that, with new faculty. So, the concern for me when I actually did that exercise, looking at the strategic plan, I said, gosh, we don't have the resources to do the things we want to do to really, push the institution along, because we're building infrastructure, we're maintaining certain things, and certainly adding most of it to instruction. But in terms of, the number of students and whether that has gone up or not, I cannot begin to tell you the compliance that this institution has been burdened with over the past, I would say, 5 to 8 years. I would say probably half of my job now is compliance to the U.S. Department of Ed, the Higher Learning Commission, the state government, federal government. I have a security now that I have to comply with for federal financial aid. Institutions are being so burdened by compliance, it's really difficult to keep up. So even if students haven't, the number of students haven't gone up, the compliance is just unbelievable.
I'm sorry?
Could I add to that?
Yes.
Okay, just like to add to that, the question says, how would you sell it to the community? I would take that document that we showed and say, when you were paying $120, that was based on 3 mills. Today, 10 years later, you're at that particular level. The document from our 2013 meeting, when Dr. Jensen put together the board report, again, said the additional mill would provide approximately $3.3 million. Today it provides more than that, which partially replaces the $4.5 million tax revenue lost in recent years. So again, documentation, and I understand what some board members can say is things that are going on, but the documentation, I would basically say, is it's not a tax increase. It's maintaining the level of operations within the college, and when that time comes about, when that state equalized value and taxable value starts growing to the point where you can drop that mill, that's the point where the recommendation would be coming forth. But as you know, Trustee, as a real estate person, that Headley Amendment, limits what happens. Has been limiting things since 1995 on how much. There's no bottom when things start dropping. There is no bottom that keeps it from falling below 1.5% or 5%. It keeps dropping based upon whatever the market is, but the comeback is much, much slower and is controlled.
At the end of the day, I got the greatest respect for you,
Thank you.
but this is what they tell us. You're going to come back and tell us it's not a tax increase after we voted in. At the end of the day, we're losing a lot of young professionals to Plymouth, to Northville, to Canton, because they're looking at, I can buy this much house, I can buy a house twice the size for the same taxes. They look in the school districts that are comparable. These are decisions, these are everyday decisions that I live with, so I'm just